Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Today we are dissecting a collision, a really raw, um, unscripted conversation between a devout Christian woman and a professional atheist broadcaster.
Yeah, and it starts as this simple debate about evidence, but it just spirals into something so much deeper.
It really does. It's a masterclass on how we process reality, moving from the strict logic of how we know what's true all the way to, the terrified emotional core of how we handle death.
It's faith versus skepticism, but it's also, I think, hope versus reality.
It is a heavy one. You rarely see a conversation pivot so sharply like that.
Not like this. It starts in the head with philosophy, epistemology, all that, and it ends entirely in the heart. It really forces you to question not just what you believe, but why you believe it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fascinating ride. And before we jump into the deep end, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. It really helps us keep these deep dives coming.
So let's set the table.
Right. We have a caller named Amanda. Who is she?
Amanda's calling from Lynchburg, Virginia. And from the audio, she sounds like a very sweet, very traditional lady. She identifies as Independent Baptist.
Though she drops this funny little detail, doesn't she? That she sometimes goes to Pentecostal churches because they have better concerts.
Right, which is great. It just instantly humanizes her. She isn't calling in to, preach fire and brimstone.
No, not at all.
She's calling because she is genuinely baffled. Her whole premise is, I don't understand how atheism is even possible. For her, God is just obvious, like gravity.
And the idea that someone could just opt out of that, it doesn't compute for her.
It doesn't. And on the other side, you've got Matt, the host of the Atheist Experience.
I've seen clips of his show. And look, yeah, usually these things turn into shouting matches. You expect him to just, I don't know, throw a biology textbook at her.
But he doesn't do that. He takes a very different route here. He doesn't start with science. He starts with his own biography.
Why do you think he does that?
It's a smart move. It lowers the defenses. He explains he wasn't born a skeptic. He was raised Southern Baptist and Episcopalian. He was the kid collecting rosaries, writing down prayers. He was deep in it.
He's basically saying, I used to be exactly where you are.
Precisely. He speaks her language. But obviously, something changed.
So what was it? What was the catalyst?
It was a realization about methodology. This is the first big takeaway for our listeners. What he calls the epistemic double standard.
Okay, epistemic double standard. That sounds a little academic. Break that down for us.
Well, think about how you solve any problem in your daily life. Your car breaks down, a pipe is leaking, whatever. You use evidence. You observe, you test, you verify. Let's call that System A.
Right. That's the method of reality. If I lose my keys, I don't just hope they appear. I retrace my steps.
Exactly. You look for them. But Matt realized that for his religious beliefs, and only for those beliefs, he was using a System B. Feelings, revelation, prayer.
And if he applied that System B to finding his keys,
It would fail miserably every single time. He uses a cookie jar analogy here, doesn't he?
he does, and it's devastatingly effective.
So a cookie's stolen from the jar. How do you find out who did it? You check for chocolate on the kid's hands. You look for crumbs. You use evidence.
You don't kneel in the kitchen and pray for the universe to reveal the truth to your heart.
Because you'd never find the culprit. You'd just be a hungry person on your knees. Matt's point is that we trust the evidence method for everything that matters. Keeping planes in the sky, curing diseases. But religion asks you to just throw it out.
And instead use faith, a tool that has, what, a 0% success rate in solving any real-world mystery.
Right. And he escalates this with that 100 years argument. That really stood out to me.
The stagnation versus evolution idea.
Yeah. Imagine walking into a science or literature department today versus 100 years ago. It's completely different. New discoveries, new theories, new proofs.
The textbooks have changed. We know more.
But if you walk into a theology department, you've got the same book. The interpretations might be a bit nicer, maybe, than they were in 1920, but there's no new data.
That suggests the method isn't actually investigating reality. If it were, you'd be making discoveries.
That's his argument. It's a tough pill to swallow. But hold on, because Amanda doesn't think she's just relying on tradition. She thinks she has hard data. She has a miracle.
Ah, right. This is where the conversation really shifts into evidence versus just interpretation.
Yes. She brings up her grandson. At 2 years old, he had a tour. on his pituitary gland.
Which is just every parent's worst nightmare.
Terrifying. So she says the doctors did MRIs but offered no treatment. They just watched it. And over time, the tumor shrank and then disappeared.
And her conclusion is,
I can't explain this, therefore God did it.
which is the classic God of the gaps argument.
Exactly. It's a specific logical fallacy, an argument from ignorance. The formula is always, there is a gap in my knowledge, therefore my supernatural belief fills that gap.
Matt has a great analogy for this too, the wet dog one.
I love this one because it's so visual. So you're in your living room, your dog runs in, soaking wet. You didn't see what happened.
Okay, so you could guess it's raining outside. That's a reasonable guess.
It's a guess. You could say, I don't know how he got wet unless it's raining. But does the wet dog prove it's raining?
No, of course not. The neighbor could have sprayed him with a hose, could have jumped in a pool.
Exactly. The only honest answer is, I don't know. Jumping to it must be rain is a logical leap, and jumping to it must be God for the tumor is the exact same leap. We know tumors go into remission.
But Manda pushes back. She says, but we were praying. She's trying to establish a causal link there.
And that's where Matt brings in the data. Because we actually have studies on this. This isn't just philosophy.
On intercessory prayer, right? Praying for other people.
Yes. And the science shows it works at the weight of chance. The recovery stats for people being prayed for are identical to those who aren't.
But there's a twist, isn't there?
A fascinating one. Some studies showed that when patients know they're being prayed for, their outcomes can actually be worse.
Wait, really? Worse? How is that even possible?
It's not supernatural. It's what they call performance anxiety. Think about it. You're sick and you know your whole church is praying for you. You feel this immense pressure to get better so you don't let them down.
That creates stress.
A ton of stress. Stress releases cortisol, which suppresses your immune system.
That is just wild. So the miracle Manda is clinging to is really just selection bias. We count the hits and ignore the misses.
Precisely. If the boy had died, it would have been God's will. Since he lived, it's God's miracle. It's rigged, so God always gets the credit, but never the blame.
So up to this point, Matt is winning on logic. He's got the analogies, the science, but then the whole call just shifts.
It really does.
This is where I stopped taking notes and just listened. Manda stops arguing about tumors, and she opens up about the real reason she believes.
The emotional anchor. She starts talking about her sister. When Manda was just 13, her sister committed suicide.
And she says so vulnerably, if I believed I would never see her again, I couldn't bear it. That just changes everything.
It stops you in your tracks. Suddenly, it's not about epistemology or cookie jars anymore. It's about survival. That belief is a shield against the horror of permanent loss.
And this puts Matt in a really tough spot. Because logic says he should tell her she's wrong. But empathy, well, empathy says let her have her comfort.
But he doesn't back down. He actually argues that this comfort is toxic, that it's a disservice.
Which sounds so cruel, doesn't it? To tell a grieving woman her hope is fake.
It feels cruel in the moment, but his argument is that this false hope has a cost. It prevents us from processing the reality of death. It's an avoidance mechanism.
He uses that billion-dollar inheritance analogy to explain this, right?
Yes, and this is such a crucial mental model. Imagine you're told from birth that on your 18th birthday, you'll inherit $1 billion. You plan your whole life around it.
You don't worry about a career, saving money, anything.
You just dream about the yacht. Then you turn 18 and nothing. It was all lie.
Devastating.
Right. But here's the key part. If you spend the rest of your life crying about the money you never really had, you ruin the life you do have.
And the $1 billion is heaven.
Exactly. He's saying if you spend your time on Earth obsessing over a paradise that doesn't exist, you're devaluing the only time you actually get. You're mourning a fantasy instead of living your reality.
He also mentions how it changes how we treat people now.
The opportunity cost of the afterlife. If I think I have eternity to say I'm sorry to you, I mean, I don't say it today. Matt's point is that atheism believing this is it makes every moment infinitely more valuable. Scarcity creates value.
Manda actually proves his point in a horrible way. She tells that story about going to a priest after her sister's suicide.
God, that was awful to hear. A 13-year-old girl grieving, and the priest implies her sister might be in hell because suicide is a sin.
It's monstrous.
It is, and it shows you can't have the comfort of heaven without the threat of hell. Matt points out that in his worldview, her sister isn't suffering. She isn't burning, she's just done. The suffering is over.
In a strange way, the atheist view offered her more peace in that moment than the church did.
Absolutely. So Matt has taken away the miracle, he's taken away heaven, and Manda asks the obvious question, what do you have left? What are your tools?
Because if you strip away the divine, the world can feel like a very scary place.
And this is where the whole conversation resolves so beautifully. Matt shares a personal story about his grandfather.
He reframes the idea of a reward.
Yes, the reward wasn't some future meeting in the clouds. The reward was the time they had together. And he gives Manda this mental tool. He asks, what would your loved one want?
It's such a grounding question. It puts the focus back on the relationship.
It does. Would Manda's sister want her to sit around for 40 years being miserable, just waiting to die? Or would she want Manda to go live a full, happy life for both of them?
Matt says his grandfather would have told him to get over it and go live.
Right. It honors the dead by living well. It's a deeply humanist approach that doesn't need anything supernatural. It's just people helping people.
Amanda's reaction is not what you'd expect.
No. She cries. But she says, I didn't think I'd end up crying. Thank you for being real nice. She actually felt heard.
She doesn't become an atheist.
No, and why would she in a 15-minute call? But she admits that while she couldn't bear the thought of no afterlife, she sees that he can. She sees the monster she feared is just a guy who loves his grandfather.
So the bridge wasn't built on logic in the end. It was built on shared grief.
100%. The logic, the wet dogs and cookie jars that just cleared the brush. The shared vulnerability built the road between them. They found common ground in the universal experience of loss.
It's a powerful reminder that while we might disagree on the why and how of the universe,
We're all stuck in the same boat when it comes to the end. We're all aware of our expiration date. The question is, does that date make you despair, or does it make you wake up earlier to enjoy the sunrise?
that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We've gone from checking for chocolate on kids' hands to facing the void of mortality. It's a lot to process.
It is. We started with, how do we know what is true? And found that we all have to figure out how to live with the fact that our time is limited.
And if I can leave you with one thought stemming from that billion-dollar inheritance idea, if you knew absolutely for a fact that this life was the only one you had, what conversation have you been putting off that you need to have today?
That is the ultimate question.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Take care of each other.